Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Herbert Nkala, a former chairman and director of up to 10% of companies quoted on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, current chairman of FBC Holdings and OK Zimbabwe, amongst others. Enjoy this informative and inspirational conversation. Herbert Nkala, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor. I am so happy to have you on this episode. So welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, Herbert.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for inviting me to your program. It's a great honor.
You know, I've been looking at your bio and CV and reading around, and I have absolutely no doubt that a lot of Zimbabweans are going to be inspired by the conversation that you and I are going to have. Let's go back, Herbert, to you were born in Caesar. You were raised by an amazing mother who laughed, who danced, who taught you to be comfortable with crying. But your dad, a Methodist priest and teacher, was a very strict man. What did that upbringing do to Herbert Nkala?
I grew up in a very humble and very, very large family. Together, 8 children and six step siblings, so a total of 14. And my father ruled with an iron fist. He was a typical Pentecostal disciplinarian. He was stern, and we prayed every morning and prayed every evening. You did not dare miss the evening prayers, because that was the time when there was a session after prayers as to what lessons were learned on that day. And this was every single day of our lives. If someone had done something right, it was recognized and praised. If someone had done something wrong, you wished the earth would open up and swallow you, because there will be a very, very strong, forceful cautioning and correction. I guess in today we'd call it, in business we call it a performance appraisal. So with the daily performance appraisal, which came in a pretty strong and robust way. So I learned discipline. I learned discipline from my father, and those who work with me today, whether at board management level, they know that this is the sine qua non of how we do business. Is that discipline is the bedrock of how we run our businesses. My mother, on the other hand, was an incredibly loving, warm, caring, laughing, dancing, taught us to cry when it was time to cry, and taught us to laugh when it was time to laugh. And the two parents, it was the hard and the soft parts of our lives, of my life, that I believe has given me a balance to be tough when I need to be, on discipline, and to be warm and loving and caring and fatherly at work, as well as to my children.
This discipline of your dad, and indeed the love coming from your mother, for me, evidences itself when you're 17, when you decide to take what you call the walk of love. You walk from Kwekwe to Harare to raise money for Gyro's Jiri. You were aiming to raise $600. At that time, you ended up raising $960. Talk to me about what motivated you at that age to do something like that. And you actually say this was perhaps the most difficult thing that you'd ever done, indeed have ever done up to this time. Talk to me about what led you to do that and what effect that had on your life.
I learned that one of the gyrosphere centers in Bulawayo, the roof had been blown off, and the association did not have money to repair the roof. So I went to see the finance director, was Joshua Malinga, who's like a brother and a close friend up to now, and asked him how much was required. And I was told that $600 was required, but the association could not raise it. So I went back to school with a friend of mine. We started talking about it. We're very good athletes while we're running up and down, and it came to me that perhaps we could be running, raising money. When I discussed that with my friend Francis, we very quickly agreed that we will run, first of all, to Kadoma, and the enthusiasm and the recklessness of youth, we decided that no, Kadoma was too near us to Harare.
Wow.
And in no time at all, we had agreed to do that. And we had people like Mike Neville, people like Jay Ramji. They assisted us to find the sponsorship that we required. And in no time at all, schools closed, and on the day that the schools closed, we left Kwekwe, were taken to Kwekwe town by the school and many other children, and we started running, I don't know, from the post office towards Harare. And because we had other kids and a bit of media, we started running extremely fast. And by the time we got to the turnoff to Kokwe, which is about 4 kilometers, we were totally exhausted, totally. And we looked up at the sign, which said Harare 276 kilometers. So that's we got our work cut out. We sat and cried for 10 minutes and said, what did we get ourselves into? But me, being the team leader, said to Francis, we got ourselves into this, we are going to do it. And the next 3.5 days were an absolute nightmare, as we had to do no less than 70 kilometers a day. And this was during the war. Francis, by the way, was a white Zimbabwean. So a black kid and a white kid walking sometimes at night during the war was incredibly dangerous and also physically and mentally tiring. On many occasions, we wanted to stop a car or a bus to jump in, but we talked to ourselves and said we are going to complete this. And yes, we did complete the journey, maybe 8 hours behind schedule, because we were being met by the Catholic bishop at the cathedral, and people had been waiting for us for 7-8 hours for us to get in. We got in completely worn out, as you would imagine. And we went to rest, and for 3 days almost continuous sleeping, but mission accomplished, and certainly one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do. Certainly the most difficult thing I did then at that age.
But it opened doors for you, Herbert. Because of what you did, the Gyros Junior Association offered you a scholarship to go and study overseas. That was amazing.
It changed the entire trajectory of my life. When we got back to school, Mary's brothers in Kwekwe, the old man Gyros Jerry himself came to present to receive the check. And as you said earlier on, is that we had exceeded our target of $600 by 50%. It raised 960, which was more than adequate for the repairs that were required. The scholarship was not from the Gyros Jira Association. It was a Commonwealth. Commonwealth used to give Gyros Jiri scholarships for people living with disability, but he got permission to give it to us because of what we had done.
Obviously, you didn't know when you did this work of love that it will result in this award of a Commonwealth scholarship?
Absolutely not. It was never the intention. The intention was simple and straightforward. It was to raise money to repair a damaged building.
Fantastic. And then you receive the scholarship, Herbert, and you leave for the UK to go and study for a BSc honors in biochemistry. And what were the highlights of being out there in the world studying for this degree?
Well, we were coming out of Rhodesia, so being in England was actually quite an incredible, life-changing experience. With all the opportunities to change your life through education, it is something that I took very, very seriously. Of course, I had time to play sports, basketball, rugby, karate, and with the other students, but never forgot what I had left behind. Tough sacrifices that had been made by the parents, and I was very pleased when I eventually got my degree, which I passed with honors. And a part of the requirements of the scholarship, the Commonwealth scholarship, which you got through the Jaros Degree Association, was that soon after graduating, you went back home and you start to work for your country, which is exactly what I did at the completion of my degree.
And then you come back and you're back in Zimbabwe in 1981, and you get a job with Dairy Board as a production management trainee. And you do exceptionally well, getting a promotion almost every year. It appears that Dairy Board played a huge role in who you became professionally. Am I right, Herbert?
Absolutely right. We always say, I think it's to do with milk, which is the first food that we eat at birth from your mother, is that those of us who were lucky to work for Dairy Board can never get it out of our veins. We've worked for other iconic organizations, but Dairy Board remains very, very close to my heart. So going back is that, yes, I arrived back with a science degree. It was very difficult to join industry. And like most of us, the first place to look at was to see if you can be occupied while looking. And yes, I did teach in Gweru for a very, very short time, and eventually saw an advert for production trainees at Dairy Board, which I was very lucky to be appointed to be one of the 6 or so trainees. But that meant my salary coming down to 50% from what I was getting as a teacher. I think at the time the figures were like, as a teacher you got $160 a month, but as a production trainee it was $80. But it was a sacrifice that I made, and I think that if any one of your young people are watching, Trevor, is this get rich quick syndrome that appears to be popular with our younger people, is that it is important to take a long-term view. I was looking at a long-term view. I knew that my salary will come down by 50%, but I knew that in the long term, I'll get a career in industry that will bring the best out of me and bring the best potential out of me. Dairy Board, if I can go back to that, is that during the 10 years that I was with Dairy Board, when we were trainees, because I was broke as a trainee, I worked extremely hard, so that when we finished our training, I would go back to the factory to do another 4 or 5 hours. And as a result, a year's training, I finished it in 7-8 months and got promoted to supervise my colleagues who I had been trained with. I met some pretty iconic leaders of industry today at Deribot. My employer and boss were Kumburai Katsande and Eddie Cross, who was the MD. But Kumburai had a huge impact on me. His work ethic, his fairness, and motivation was extraordinary, and I continue to see him as a brother and as a mentor right now. Then my next general manager was Mishek Nyampingidza, who is an incredible person. And I had the pleasure of working with people like Anthony Mandwanza, who's still doing a great job in running Deribot today. But during that time, I was doing an MBA at the university. And one day I was I'd been running Chipinge factory, and I'd been promoted to run Harare, a factory. And one day I was walking about and I met a marketing consultant who had come from Ireland called David Kane. And David Kane said, Herbert, would you like to go into marketing? I said, are you crazy? I've got a science degree. I've been counting bacteria all for the past 10 years.
Right.
And he said, listen, I think you have reached the end of your technical career. It is time for you to try something. He said, I see something new about marketing. Would you like to try it?
That is what made you switch after getting your MBA from UZ to get into marketing.
Yes, it was the thought was provoked by David Kane, who was running marketing at the time, but was about to retire and go back to England. So he wanted a replacement as head of marketing at Deribot. And clearly, I think at the time, Anthony will correct me, there must have been 5,000 of us or something. But he recognized something in me that he thought I could switch successfully. And we went to talk to Kumburai Katsande, our GM then, and he said, go for it. So I started off as an export manager, and within a year, I've been promoted to marketing director. Those days, it was called assistant general manager.
When you look back now, Herbert, David was right. He saw something in you, and he changed your career.
He changed my career. And it's certainly one of the best decisions that I ever made. And I think at the time there was a thinking that if you worked in production, engineering, and lab, which is what I did as a technical manager, is that you stayed with that all your life. I would like to advise the young people watching your program, Trevor, that if you have done a degree in law, or you've done a degree in medicine, you've done a degree in history, it's merely given you intellectual capacity to be able to change and to adopt your dream, if need be. My daughter tells me that at the New York Stock Exchange, most of the brokers, they are engineers. So the days are gone where you think that what you've studied is what you have to live with for the rest of your life. On the contrary, is that education gives you ability to pursue your dream, whatever it is. It gives you the versatility and the learning capacity to pursue your dream. So yes, I changed to marketing, and as you know, later on in life, I actually ran a hotel group, which appears very...
What fascinates me, Herbert, is, as I have these conversations with people, is how our lives take turns as a result of such encounters. How our lives take turns as a result of what somebody says or what somebody does. And there you are, your life takes a turn, and you've become very successful in where your life tend towards. What's your reflection on that in terms of how do we arrive at our purpose?
There is a brother to me, General Philip Valerio Swanda, who always says to me that no one is self-made. No one. And I've started to believe that very, very strongly, that none of us are self-made. There's always a catalyst somewhere. And that catalyst that changes your life often in a very, very remarkable way. When you look back yourself, you say, "Damn, was that what this was about?" Because it looks more. It looked. I think it's Nelson Mandela who says it looks impossible until you do it. Now, yes, certainly, I think there's got to be a certain trait in you which wants to change, a certain trait in you which is adventurous, a trait in you which wants to learn, a trait in you which wants to achieve. And we have more in control of our lives than we imagine. We think, we look at people who are successful and we say, oh, they're lucky. Well, but luck is where opportunity meets preparedness. And if the opportunity comes, you're not prepared for it. If you're prepared and the opportunity doesn't come. So there's got to be that opportunity where things start to happen to you. But most importantly, you've got to be ready for them. So I remember waking up after my father died, and we were really being looked after by my mother. Is that the number of times I woke up in the middle of the night and heard her crying in her room and praying. Is that we don't know how many people are praying for us. Some we know, like my mother, some we don't know. So there is always somebody who is praying for you, somebody who is walking the journey for you, somebody who is holding your hand. Is that you? It's up to you to be prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. There is always God up there who has seen it all, who knows everything, who is also there to assist you. So you are never alone. You are never, ever alone. And no one should go around life thinking that they are on their own and that they can achieve on their own. There is a whole lot of other forces around us that are positively intervening in our favor.
That's powerful, Herbert. I just want to pursue that point. Is there anything that a young person listening to you right now can deliberately tap onto that network, or is it something that is out of our control?
It's always there around us. Always there around us. The goodwill by people, the opportunities are always there. I think we just need to be almost as pure as children in absorbing the stimulus around us. Children are continuously experimenting, continuously learning, continuously making mistakes, continuously falling, and continuously getting up. As often as we fall, is as often each time we fall, it's an opportunity for us to get up and be better and stronger. So the opportunity, it has to start inside you to say, I'm not on my own. I will change. I will be a better person. I'll realize, I'll realize the best out of me, and you develop a frightening determination to achieve that, like a 16-year-old walking in the middle of all adversity for 276 kilometers. We need that naive, almost naive commitment to a vision, a total commitment, which says, I'm going to do it regardless. It's like a little child that you see wanting to walk, falls and walks and falls and walks and falls until they do, until they walk. That's the determination that we need for us to achieve. There is no one out there who has a singular prerogative and privilege to meet their dreams. Every one of us can.
Fantastic. And as a result of this change in your career because of Dave Kane, you end up at National Breweries as the Marketing and Public Affairs Director. But what struck me there in what is you're leading the team that developed Zambezi Lager. Talk to me about how that was. That must have been both challenging and very exciting. Talk to us about, share with us the highlights of that experience.
Yes, I was very lucky to get a job as the marketing director at the breweries. My MD then was the late Gabriel Shamu, who was quite an incredible leader. He had a vision that while we were brewing SAB products, the well-known ones, your Castle, Lion, Calic Black Label, is that Zimbabwe could develop its own brands of beer, and I was given the task to do that. I worked with an incredible young lady called Emily Chitawa, and of course the outgoing marketing director that I had just taken over from George Katz to develop a beer initially, which would be Zimbabwean brand, but for export. We developed Zambezi Lager. Zambezi Lager, which was more a mainstream type beer, very close to your popular beers like Heineken. And we gave it a typical African name, Zambezi, green bottle, and it's been very, very successful, particularly in Zimbabwe's tourism resorts.
It must give you tremendous satisfaction, Herbert, seeing the products still living on so long after those eventful years.
Yeah, well, you know, in any other country, I'll be getting 1 US cent for every bottle sold. That's not happening. That's not happening. I've raised it with the former MD of Delta, Joe Mtizwa.
He's not budging.
And of course, they all laugh at me, and of course, that's what it is. But yes, Zimbabwe can create a powerful homegrown brands. We have seen them in products like your Tanganda, Mazoe, etc., etc. Oh, by the way, Anton Mandwanza, I will tell you that I also developed, when I was at Derrybot, before I went to the breweries, I developed a powder, a brand called Super Spray. I developed that as well. And again, Mandiwanza, I'm sure one day he will pay me something so that I can use that for my favorite hobby.
Is Super Spray still in the market?
Yes, it is.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic. Then you go into tourism, Herbert, becoming the first CEO of Rainbow Tourism. You joined Rainbow Tourism when they had 4 hotels. After 16 years at Rainbow Tourism, they had 15 hotels, and you had assisted them in listing and raising funding to be listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. What were the highlights of that episode of your life?
Well, you know, this was yet another complete shot in the dark, jumping into unknown territory without any knowledge of that particular industry. When the job was advertised for CEO of a new company that was being formed by government, but being a private venture, is that I applied and fortunately got the job. And my first chairman and deputy chairman were Livingstone Kwata and Ibo Mandaza, and with many other directors, those 2 in particular gave me a lot of support in an industry that I knew very little about. But I took the initiative for self-development, and I'm totally a believer, and I'm a zealot when it comes to training and certain development and personal development. I knew that to learn about hotel management from my subordinates would take long and would be difficult, and at times will compromise both me and the subordinate. So I got in touch with a former Zimbabwean hotelier called Ron Stringfellow, who by then was running Southern Sun. And I told him that I had become appointed as a CEO of a hotel group, at which point he laughed. He laughed heartily, and they said, "Well, how can I help?" I said, "I want to come and sit in your office and learn as much as I can in 2 weeks." He said, "Come," and I went there. And I just sat as his shadow. I watched him talking to employees and sat at the back and just absorbed. I watched him talking to trade unions. I watched him talk to banks. I walked around with him when he inspected hotels. I watched him going to budgeting meetings. I watched him doing appraisal of his managers, etc. And I tell you, there is no library that I could have gone into and learned as much as I did in 2 weeks. And when I came back, believe you me, I was ready to run a successful hotel group, purely by sitting and listening and absorbing and listening to his stories. You know, which is now a subject they teach in the MBA now is learning by storytelling. And just listening to a highly experienced executive like Ron Stringfellow, I learned what no library can teach me, certainly in that short space of time.
What advice or what lessons are there for young people watching you right now? I mean, that's what you did was very unusual, Herbert. Not everybody does that kind of stuff. What wisdom did you take out of this kind of learning, sitting at somebody's feet?
Well, it's really the ultimate learning experience. This is not textbook stuff. This is not theory. This is not reading a book that was written by Peter Drucker in Boston or some or Peter Kotler at Harvard. This is real. This is real. This is sitting in there and watching a real life movie happening right there in front of you. And I think that the lesson for younger people is that, yes, once you've got the intellectual capability and versatility to learn a new skill, is that you can greatly accelerate your learning curve experience, reduce the chances of making expensive mistakes by listening and asking questions. We do too little of that. I have a philosophy with the companies that I lead right now, that everybody goes through training at least once a year. Everybody. That comes from the CEO right down to the cleaner. And when it comes to the CEO is compelled by me to grow on attachment. For instance, if you are running a bank like our John Mshawan, that every year he must find a bank somewhere in the world where he goes and sits on attachment for 2 weeks. If you are running a supermarket chain like Alex Yawora at O'Kay's, is that he goes to a supermarket chain of world-class repute and he sits there and learns from there.
Why is that important, Herbert? Why is that important?
It is easy to be successful in a place where there is relatively less competition. I always say to my CEOs, you are doing very well here, but I would like to compare you to somebody who jumps 5 feet high and goes to another planet and find that people there jump 8 feet. So we always say, it's okay. My job is to provoke my management into continuous improvement. That is my job. I create tension in the organization. I don't want complacency. You know, show me a person who is satisfied. They say, show me a person who is satisfied with what they're doing and show me a failure. Is that my job is to create continuous dissatisfaction, continuous tension, continuous recognition that things can be done better. And this is why I send managers to organizations where people are doing better than us, so that they come back with a gap between what they are knowing and doing and what we should aspire to.
So clearly that works, because coming in from the cold into an industry that you knew nothing about, and sitting at somebody's feet and being taught about the industry, you ended up being twice the tourism personality of the year, and you headed the tourism industry in Zimbabwe for 4 years. Clearly something worked.
Yes, well, my colleagues recognized they saw something in me first of all, to vote for me as tourism personality of the year, not once but twice, and also to be their chair. And this is something that has remained my passion. We were able to grow 4 hotels into 15 hotels. We were able to list the company on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, having from 100% government ownership to being a totally privatized entity. We were able to attract the biggest hotel company in the world, Accor of France, to be our major shareholder. So the last few years, with Ibo Mandaza as my chairman, is that I was actually reporting into the board here for governance issues, but for operational issues, I was then reporting into Paris the last 2 years before I retired, after 15 years.
Herbert, as we sit now, the hotel industry, hotel, restaurant, and industry has been decimated by COVID. Is there a way of the industry coming back, particularly our own local industry? What are your thoughts about how the industry gets back, Herbert?
The tourism industry, which is the biggest industry on planet Earth, it employs 10% of all people. That's the biggest industry. Contributes, say, about 12% of GDP to the world. Is the biggest employer of people throughout the world. This industry, as we sit here, Trevor, is decimated. It's completely decimated. There is nothing. Most hotel groups have shut down. And I was reading an article yesterday where there is the highest number of hotels under administration, liquidation, or on sale. The same with airlines. Is that other than 3 or 4 American airlines, all other airlines in the world, almost all other airlines in the world are facing liquidation. Those 3 or 4 American airlines that are doing well, that is the beginning of the answer to your question, to say, what should we be doing here? We should be doing what are those 3 or 4 American, in the top 10 airlines, Trevor, that are still reasonably viable. 4 or 5 of them are American. What do they do differently? They focus on the domestic market. They focus on no frills. That is the solution for our recovery here. Is that it's going to take a long time to get the 30 or 40% tourists to come from Europe, the 10-15% of tourists to come from Asia, and of course the majority of our tourists who come from South Africa. They are not going to be coming in a hurry. They are going to have 2 big problems. The airlines are not going to get back into the air as quickly as we think they will, and there is the fear of disease. You're not going to take your family to a place into a room where you don't know who slept there last night, regardless of how much hygiene there is that there's going to be apprehension by people to take families too far away from home. There is, however, one customer that is not going to be terribly frightened out of that, is the domestic market. So the recovery of our hotel industry, of our tourism industry, is going to be driven from the domestic market. You and me, Trevor, can drive to Victoria Falls with our families, and if there is enough financial and health protection incentive is that we will go. It's much easier to persuade the domestic people to go into our resorts and enjoy what God and posterity has given them than to bring in tourists from outside. So this is the catalyst. This is where it's going to start from. The cover of the tourism industry is going to be self-drives, it's going to be domestic, and it's going to be the hotels themselves offering hygiene protection that will give you a comfort level to take your family to, and also financial incentives for a country that has generally got low incomes.
Mm. Herbert, your career as a director, as a chairman, is iconic. You currently chair FBC Holdings, OK Zimbabwe, Zagrindam. You are director of Tanganda Company, Mutiruki Sugar Company, Nuanetsi Range. What has this experience been like for you?
Companies invite board members to give them stability, to give them opportunities for growth and for profitability. Companies, directors are like pilots and watchdogs. They look after the interests of shareholders. If you take a company like OK's, OK has got 30,000 shareholders. They can't all attend meetings. They look at people like us to look after their assets. FBC has got 8,500 shareholders. They look at people like myself as directors to protect and to grow their value. So what do they look for? They look for a track record of discipline. And that is something, like I said earlier on, Trevor, that is the bedrock of my value system in business. It's discipline. I think you will see how when we started what we call the indigenous banks and indigenous institutions, is that we have had a massive shakeout. We have lost a lot of our colleagues, sadly, along the way. But there are some, like FBC, for instance, that one Minister of Finance said it is the best run bank in the country, including international banks. And that is based on discipline, on doing the right things properly. And we all know what needs to be done. But if we have leaks and holes in our disciplinary fabric, is that things very, very quickly go wrong. The second thing, of course, is appointing the right people into leadership. Organizations are run by people. Trevor, it's about people, it's about leadership, whether it's a home, it's a company, or it's a country, is that you got to get the leadership absolutely right. Good leaders will take an institution and an average institution and make it great and make it excellent. Bad leaders will do exactly the opposite. They will take an excellent institution and bring it to its knees very quickly. So I amongst the primary goals and beliefs and philosophy of my leadership in the boardroom, the starting point is discipline. The second thing is getting the right people. The third thing is motivating those people. The fourth thing is to reward them on a performance-related basis so that they become entrepreneurial employees who benefit from the success of the organization, and a whole lot of other things that we do to drive growth, to drive stability, to drive profitability.
I think, viewers all around the world would want to know that you either have chaired or directed about 10% of the companies that are quoted on the Zimbabwean Stock Exchange. That's a huge achievement, Herbert.
Yes, it is, and it's been an honor It's been a great privilege to be part of the leadership of business in my country. Is that our predecessor government, the Rhodesian government, saw strong synergies between business and government, and they were one. Government made business strong, and business made government strong. It's synergistic. It is something that I hope when I retire and sit under a tree to read John Tizwa's many books, is that I would like to think that I contributed towards creating and strengthening synergies between business and the government of the day.
I know you are a family man, married to lovely Christina, and you have 6 kids. I'm fascinated, Herbert, by the fact that you actually have 17 other kids that you have assisted, kids in inverted commas.
Yeah, you better say that.
You've sent them to school. You have educated them. They're from, indigent families, as it were. They've become doctors. They become engineers. What makes you do this, Herbert?
Trevor, when I started working back home, and Christine rejoined me from the UK, is that the first Christmas, it occurred to me that being a Catholic, that Emerald Children's Home, there were kids there who probably had never celebrated a proper Christmas with a family. And we went to see the nuns who were running the children's home, and we were given 3 amazing kids, 2 girls and a boy. And they came to spend Christmas with us. And I think we did the same at Easter. Took the same children, and after that they refused to go back. They just did not go back, and we told the nuns that this is it.
What a beautiful story.
So they were our first children. And so when the biological children came, they were already 3 elder children, and they had to accept that hierarchy, they had to accept that structure. And the first girl that we took, Maggie, is the boss. She is the senior of this family, and all the other children accept that. And then I went around talking to MPs, priests, and to find children that were highly gifted, that I could take through school. I have children from Toko, Mtare, Mberengwa, Cholocho, Binga, and that I've sent to school where their parents were not able to sow, their parents had passed on. And those have come because they were gifted. Anyway, we started with gifted children. I don't have much money. If I had lots of money, to be nice to look after many others. So yeah, those kids have become part of an extension of my family. And I always challenge them when they eventually graduate and they start working, that I want you to pay me back. And that payment is for you to go back to your village and do exactly the same. Find a child who is in a similar situation with you many years back, who is capable, but does not have the means to go ahead with the education, and you will take them through school. you will give them the same opportunity that that I gave you. And one more thing, that I will not do an audit on you. I don't do a forensic audit on them to say who is following that up or not. I say your conscience will be your judge. And I hope and pray that they are, in fact, spreading the education pandemic.
Fantastic. I mean, with you are a hands-on father. You sit on so many boards. You do a lot of other things. You find time to play golf. I know you are a passionate golfer. You know, I've played golf with you, and you've embarrassed me a number of times. You've been a single handicap for a long time. What does sport do for you?
Sport means a lot to me. I think sport teaches us a powerful lesson in life. For me, it teaches me how to be a humble winner and a graceful loser. The fact that I've beaten all my colleagues at golf today does not make me a better human being, because tomorrow the opposite is almost certainly going to be the case. So sport is very good. I wish that all people would have an opportunity to participate in a sport that they love and a sport that can take them to old age and still enjoy the exhilaration of winning and the humility of losing, while keeping you physically and mentally fit for purpose.
Fantastic. Herbert, what principles do you live by?
I read a book when I was a young executive about the triangle of beliefs. And this is largely influenced by John Watson Jr., who was the founder of IBM. And I found that triangle, that it anchors my life, it gives me the balance that I need. So the first priority in my life, the first anchor is God, is that I grew up as a very spiritual person, and I continue to be, and I continue to influence all my family and colleagues to have that anchor of the Almighty, and to have the spiritual depth to be able to dig in and dig yourself out of every single situation. Nothing is impossible with God. The second thing is the second anchor of the triangle is family. Family is everything to me. And my family, Trevor, is not just my biological family, but it's a lot of people that have become an extension of my family by gravity through relationships. So it's the family which has got many concentric circles with the core, and then another circle and another circle, and together they form a family that walks through all manner of difficulties with me. And finally, the third part of the triangle of the values is diligence and discipline. Diligence meaning hardworking, doing the right things and doing things right. And nothing ever comes easy without total dedication and commitment. If you're cruising in low gear, you're clearly not going to achieve. And the important part of that diligence is not just hardworking, doing the wrong things, it is discipline. Discipline and discipline and discipline is that. So that's it. That's it, the triangle of my value system. It works for me, and I hope that it can work for others too, Trevor.
Absolutely. You've worked with some of the most interesting people whom you have already mentioned. Who has inspired you? Who are the people that have inspired you the most in your journey of life, Herbert?
Thanks, Trevor. Yes, clearly my parents, what I talked about at the beginning about strong discipline and balance from my parents. I've also Grown up, when my father died, is that Nkala became a father to us. He was in prison most of the time, but when he came out, he became a father. Even after independence, I lived with him, and then towards the end of his life, is that he lived with me. He moved in to my house. Is that he had such a dogged determination, along with other nationalists, including our past president and our current president. He worked with them, and that he would get arrested. We'll read on the news that he was in prison. He had been sentenced to a long term. He would, after a few years, he would come out from Grey Street, as an example, and before he crossed Lobengula, he would have been throwing petrol bombs and he would be locked up again. So, and this was at a very, very young age. He was still barely 30, but his determination was absolutely incredible. And as you know, is that the ruling party was formed in his house at 4449 New Canaan Highfields, and on the 8th of August 1963, is that it was quite incredible that he has left such a legacy behind. There are people like Godfrey Majonga. Godfrey Majonga, who taught me a lot about how to live with disability and still enjoy an incredibly fulfilled and fulfilling life. When Godfrey had an accident and broke his neck, his doctors told him that neurosurgeon said by the nature of his injury, he would not live beyond 2 years. That was the average life expectation of a quadriplegic with the type of injury that he had sustained. Godfrey passed away last year after 31 years of living with that disability. And when we've asked the neurosurgeons as to why he's such an outlier, is that it was 3 things: love from his wife, incredible wife, Grace, hygiene from his doctors, but most importantly, positive mental attitude.
Wow.
And I think that is a positive mental attitude does not only save us in business, in health, it actually protects you from an early death. So a positive mental attitude is an incredible thing that I learned from Godfrey. Well, then there are people that lift you up whenever you're down. And Ed Manikai, for me, it's been like that for 20 years, is that whenever I feel low, and everybody needs a friend that will lift you when you're feeling down. Ed Manikai and me talk and laugh before we even say anything, because our job, we have found that is that we lift each other. He's an incredible young man. And finally, as Jairus Jiri himself, he was a man who hardly had any education, but created an institution, filled a vacuum that the government of the day did not see the need for an institution that looks after Black people living with disability. He created a mammoth organization with the most humble financial and all other resources. To me, he is a true hero.
And I discovered that this current speaker, Jacob Mudenda, was your English teacher.
Jacob Mudenda is one of the people that had huge influence on me. He taught me English. I always joke that if I speak bad English, please blame speaker Mudenda. But he was an incredible teacher, taught me English. What's amazing is that he picked 2 or 3 students that he believed in and shared lots of things with in class and outside class, politics, and adopted us as his young brother, so to speak. He is an exceptional man for recognizing your needs and giving the motivation. He also, I'm aware that he paid school fees for a lot of children from indigent families. But what was even more than money, is the kind of support and encouragement and confidence that he built in us and to me in particular.
Herbert, I know you, at any given time, you're reading about 3 books. I know you've brought some books that you want to share with our viewers. This is perhaps the most popular section of the book, Trevor's Book Club. What books have you read? 3 books that you've read, Herbert, that have changed who you have become?
Thank you, Trevor. I just picked 3 books. But of course, I'm reading John Tizwa's books. He's an amazing writer, and I hope that I'll have an opportunity to read all of them. And I'm sure that right now, everybody is reading the latest books to come onto the shelves electronically or otherwise. But at the moment, I decided, Trevor, just to talk about 3 books that have had some profound influence on me. The first one is Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. You know, by definition, an outlier is an extraordinary achievement. If you, whether it's sport or it's mathematics or it's science or it's business, is that performance is always put on a normal distribution curve, a bell curve, and any performance that is outside, above or below that is an outlier. So Malcolm Gladwell has looked at I think 20 or 30 people that have achieved above that normal distribution curve and try to find out why. We often think that having extraordinary talent is what is going to make you successful. But Malcolm Gladwell says a lot more than that. The other one, Trevor, is everybody talks about John Maxwell. John Maxwell, as you know, has written over 40 books. Over 40 books. The one that I picked is called The Difference Maker. And John Maxwell writes about one thing. He writes about leadership. And he's a very spiritual man. So he sees a convergence between spirituality and leadership. And his focus is that the great attitude platitude is that once you adjust that attitude, success and happiness follow.
Wow.
He's talked about, you know, what you've heard is that attitude determines altitude. You get that attitude right, is that everything else will follow. So attitude is the difference. He has recognized 7 things that he calls the roadblocks to success. Those roadblocks are your discouragement, your fear of change, your inability to face problems, your fear, just general fear of doing things that you have not done before, and most importantly, the fear of failure. So he says, do you look like your attitude, or does your attitude look like what you want to be? And he ends his book by saying the human spirit is never defeated. It is finished when you surrender.
Wow.
The last book I've picked is George Clason. The book is called The Richest Man in Babylon. Richest Man in Babylon, Trevor, was written in 1926. That's 94 years ago. It is still a textbook in business schools today, 94 years later. It starts with 7 simple rules about how to look after your own personal wealth and creation and preservation and growth of your personal incomes. It starts with the simple things like save money, don't spend more money than you have, save 10% of your income every monthly, invest wisely, learn about whatever business you are in. The takeaway for me, Trevor, on George Clason's The Richest Man in Babylon, it answers the question as to why Babylon was the richest city in the world during its peak, during its height. It is the main reason is because the people of Babylon were rich. So if you want to create a rich country, get rich people. I think The Wealth of Nations also is a book that Adam Smith and all that also says the same. Is that in the pursuit of self-interest, you create wealth for others. So we have to, in this country, to accept that if you want a wealthy Harare, a wealthy Zimbabwe, let's create wealthy Zimbabweans. Let's create wealthy people by empowering and creation and defending of wealth by our people is that will create a rich country, not the other way around. Yeah.
Amazing books. What do you think you have learned, Herbert, from the incidents that have humbled you? What have you taken away from those humbling moments?
It's humility. It's humility to know that God has not invested the wisdom in me and me alone. I must work with teams of people. Is that something that I strongly believe in? Is that I like to work with people who are cleverer than me, people who are smarter than me, and I then release them to do what they know best. And my job is to give them support and guidance.
Herbert, we wish you all the best, and I have no doubt that viewers in Zimbabwe, on the continent, and all across the diaspora have taken away a number of nuggets and wisdom from a very inspirational life story. We wish you all the best. Herbert, remain sitting where you are and allow me to tend to our viewers in Zimbabwe, on the continent, and all across in the diaspora who follow this show every week, to say thank you so much for supporting the show. We're celebrating our first anniversary this year, and we're absolutely excited. Thank you for your support. And to remind you that, yes, we are weekly. And for you not to miss out, please click on this red button here and subscribe so that you get an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations. So until next time, cheers.